things can get out of hand quickly. Ohio faced harmful algal blooms. 40% of the water sources in Ohio have measurable algal toxins. So the issue isn't whether or not they're there, it's how much, and, are they going to get out of hand? And, quickly, all of a sudden, you can have an issue like Toledo.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we celebrate the innovators and the people leading and serving in the water industry. And Megan, I'm really excited about today's guest. Please tell us who we're going to be speaking with.
I am very excited as well to welcome Chris Miller on the podcast, who is currently Vice President of Digital Services for USALCO and former founder and CEO of Fontus Blue. And that transaction just has happened within the last 6 months of this taping. And so just excited to get Chris on the podcast to talk about that incredible journey from startup to acquisition. And I think, fun fact about Chris is we actually have some synergies with Fontus Blue and 120 Water. We share some marketing resources. Yeah. And, Chris, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Bieberdorf, who's Zionsville, Indiana. And we've got two really dynamic water companies on the same block, right?
Yeah.
How fun.
Yeah. This is going to be an exciting founding story to dive into. And so, Chris, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited that you could join us.
Pleasure to be here today, and I've always enjoyed hanging out with the 120 Water crew. So glad to actually now get a chance here to talk about kind of the Fontus Blue story and have a conversation with you all today.
Yeah. Well, and we always talk about, we've never met anyone in the water industry who doesn't have a story about how water found them. And so we would love to hear your story of, Chris, how did water find you?
Well, I like that, the framing of the question, right? Because like many things, it is, how did it come to be and how did it actually really found me? So it really starts in college. I was looking for a job, as many college students need to make money to pay that tuition. And lo and behold, I got a position washing dishes in the water treatment plant. So the University of Iowa is where I went to school. They have both the university water treatment plant as well as the city water treatment plant. We're both on the Iowa River. So it was actually related to the university. And as luck would have it, where I washed dishes and sort of got additional responsibilities, would go conduct some water quality testing. And there was a cohort, a big group of graduate students that worked in that same lab. So it gave me exposure to some, at the time, Iowa had a lot of nitrate runoff issues, and so we're sampling for that water quality, and so it not only exposed me to some kind of current issues, but I also got to see graduate students and going to work on that, and so that really kind of transformed me over to thinking, hey, why don't I continue my graduate school work, and ended up getting a master's and PhD and going on that journey. So once I became a professor, though, as far as what really made it personal and kind of linked over then to Fontus Blue was I saw an environmental working group report on disinfection byproducts, health effects of this. This was in the late 1999 or so. And it raised my awareness about, hey, water quality does actually have sort of a personal health effect, known carcinogens, all that. And so, it's hard to believe that was over 25 years ago now, and we're still obviously dealing with that. So
I love that. Love that. And then, for those that may not be familiar, just a little bit about what disinfection byproducts, high level, what is it? Why is it harmful? How is it treated? And then we can kind of talk about then how did Fontus Blue start? But
Perfect, Nate. Yeah. So, most people are familiar with that we disinfect the water to protect against microbial risk. You can smell chlorine in the water. Actually, if you smell the chlorine, you know that the water utility is doing their job and making sure that you have enough disinfectant in the water to protect against that. But one of the downsides or the byproduct of adding the chlorine is that it forms some real low level but known carcinogens that are also regulated. So water utilities have to find that right balance between protecting for disinfection and also minimizing the formation of those.
Yeah. So one of the facts that I was told really early on when I started 120 Water is that chlorine smell, if it's not favorable to you, or if you can't drink it, you just put your water in a pitcher and put it on your counter, and the chlorine smell will go away. Chris, is that true? I've never fact checked that, but do you know that to be true or not?
Yeah. So chlorine, similar again, if people have a swimming pool or so, they have to regularly add that chlorine. It will, over time, it will go away and decay and form like chloride, and it's fine for you to drink. It's even fine for you to drink water with the chlorine. But again, it's that reaction time when it actually, what it's continuing to form that's separate from the chlorine that's of concern.
Yeah.
And again, regulated. But
Yeah. So you started a very successful company called Fontus Blue, and it was, like I said, recently acquired by USALCO, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's get, why did you start Fontus Blue? What problem is Fontus solving, and what compelled you to start it?
Yeah, so as a professor, I was training young engineers. We were seeing that these new regulations were coming on specific to, actually, it was the second set of disinfection byproduct rules called Stage 2. And so I was training engineers to help consult water utilities on what they could do, what treatment options, what kind of operational strategies. And instead of consulting those utilities myself, I saw an opportunity to actually build tools for the water operations staff that could then do some of the complex calculations, the chemistry, but really help them both understand those trade-offs, again, between even like disinfection and the disinfection byproducts, and really help manage those different complexities that they were faced with.
Yeah. And what year was this, Chris? What year would this have been?
Yeah. So the official founding of the company wasn't until 2017. So I was saying earlier, I kind of really became aware at the end of 1999, 2000, the new disinfection byproduct rules. So I was actually, there were a lot of utilities that were violating, and I was consulting for. And so again, I was like, rather than just kind of have a local impact of supporting the Ohio utilities, why not, again, create tools, because it was going to be something that, all utilities were going to face.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, in the process that utilities go through, what's the investment they need to make in adjusting the chemical balance and the chemical process? Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of the impact of getting that right, and what it means to optimize?
Yeah. So obviously each decade, which is good for the need for the business, but each decade the regulations don't get simpler, right? They get more complex. So previously, they're mostly focused on like turbidity removal, so you could focus on like a single chemical, like your coagulant. But then as you want to reduce more total organic carbon and manage disinfection, corrosion control, and lead, obviously with Flint came about, and all of that. So as you keep adding to that complexity, those trade-offs, Isaac, to your question, is those trade-offs become even more challenging, because oftentimes you will improve one metric at the expense of another. And so how do you really balance all those? So again, to me, optimization is balancing trade-offs. That's what I equate with. And so, yeah, it's not like a single perfect chemical combination, but if we can quantify what those trade-offs are for the operators, then they know, hey, I will improve this by 5% and this may degrade by 2%, but we can quantify and forecast for them so that they know they'll still be in compliance and maybe even better than compliance in what their goals are for their finished water.
Yeah, so needed. And just to kind of tie it all together, Fontus Blue does this, right? As an intelligence tool for operators trying to figure this out, right? It'll kind of put in some candidates or for optimization, or describe a little bit technically about how it works, if you wouldn't.
Being a professor, maintaining, sort of that subject matter expertise in drinking water treatment, and continuing to add those different chemistries and components to it. So we are very much, the tool is built on sort of, fundamental acid-base chemistry, corrosion chemistry, those types of things. We also looked into more of the machine learning neural network. And so there are some use cases that are more applicable to that. Ours, almost all the use cases, we use fundamental chemistry as the basis. So I think, Megan, that's kind of so obviously I was teaching that material as those new, as Flint came on board and they learned what, was really important in the corrosion chemistry, or as new things come out, we found a way to really translate, the best of the science, peer-reviewed science that's out there, and again, translate it into a usable tool for the
Absolutely, yeah. And what is your reach today? How many utilities are you working with?
Yeah, so prior to the acquisition, again, you brought up Jeff Bieberdorf. I'll give him a shout out. That's been instrumental in our growth. And we're like 14 or 15 states in the U.S. that we were in. That was as of June of last year. And now it's likely 22 or 24. So we've, even in this short 6 months, have added almost 50% in terms of the state coverage. So, and I expect that to continue even more this year.
Yeah. I mean, that's a wonderful kind of success story. So when I'm doing my math in my head, almost 10 years, not quite, hustling. I'm assuming you're hustling. I'm assuming founder life wasn't all hunky-dory all the time. What'd you get right along the way? What can you point to say, I did these things right? And then, we'll talk about, the acquisition here in a minute.
Yeah. So probably shouldn't be a shocker, but I was fortunate enough to have a great team along with me, right? So even though, yes, was a single founder, I initially recruited, I think the first 3 employees that are still with the company were actually all students that I had interacted with at the university. Not all of them were civil engineers that I had taught in classes, but I'd recruited a computer science student to work on taking us from an Excel sheet to a MATLAB type program that was the precursor before we went to the cloud. So again, I know that's common in many, many successful companies, but this was, again, was critical, a great team. We also was fortunate. Ohio invested a lot of money. I know even like Indiana and Indianapolis area has done the same at creating an ecosystem that's very supportive with mentors, supportive with seed funds, those kinds of. So we were, again, I could go on, but where we had our first our first office was in a Bounce Innovation Hub. The team there was amazing, those things. And then obviously I think the one, as you kind of alluded to, Megan, being a founder requires a certain tenacity that ebbs and flows. But so I think that's the single factor of just sticking to that mission, vision, being passionate, knowing this was an impactful pursuit. And, just really staying the course and staying at it till good things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that you knew that there was a better way in your head, and that everyone deserved that level of that tool or that level of consultation. It doesn't have to be delivered by a single individual, but how can we actually deliver this to the mass? And it's just leveraging. How do you replicate your expertise in a problem that you know how to solve that matters a lot, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to overplay to our core customer, but it's, these water operators, the complexity of the job, their formal train, it's so difficult. There really was just a true empathy for that. I would not want to be faced with the legal consequences of the decisions they were being asked to make without, the adequate tools. And so, it's a real, that's tough job. Again, I know you all have that same mentality about it as our core customer. These are the people that get up and make drinking water safe every day and face those challenges. And, so it was really just to make sure to keep getting them the best tools as they continue to keep getting new challenges.
Absolutely.
I love the way you just talked about that, because I feel like what you just highlighted was how aligned you are with the pain that they actually feel. And so implementing a solution like Fontus Blue is one of those, like, how do you de-risk and kind of bring some de-risking to their decision making? They have a lot of decisions they're going to have to make. The margin for error, the consequence of getting it wrong is high. The consequence of getting it right all the time, you don't really get rewarded all that much as a water operator. So like you kind of hit the sweet spot of the pain of like, why should Fontus Blue exist? Well, because it's getting more complex and we need to reduce as much complexity for water operators as possible.
Yeah, and we know that it really was a simple decision to quit adding the corrosion hit inhibitor at Flint, right? And so oftentimes it really is that, again, back to those trade-offs, you just move the needle a little bit, that was a little extreme, totally get rid of a corrosion inhibitor, but, certainly these small things that things can get out of hand quickly. Ohio faced harmful algal blooms. 40% of the water sources in Ohio have measurable algal toxins. So the issue isn't whether or not they're there, it's how much, and, are they going to get out of hand? And, quickly, all of a sudden, you can have an issue like Toledo, right? Those kinds of things. So I think you're spot on, Isaac, sorry. I was, but, that definitely is, where it's at for them.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of the components of the Fontus Blue platform where it was new to me, the concept of a jar test, but kind of being able to kind of automate and use machine learning for some scenario planning and let water operators quickly understand, like, hey, what are the different scenarios that I could look at from a chemical composition with that, doing that much more rapidly and with a higher degree of confidence.
But it's crazy too, how even over whether it's basically over 8 to 10 years, that certain terminology, certain things that are happening outside of the water space. So like even flight simulators or VR, just as technology continues to move forward, one of the nice things is that water operators and the new ones that are entering the workforce actually expect that they will have some of these tools. And so, again, you all both know all too well that we have a really risk averse, our technology adoption, however you want to spin it. But they've still, I think, maybe don't get enough credit that they are actually, I think I've seen that level of adoption and willingness to go that route increase, just because they know without those things that other things are going to happen. So it's exciting times to be in the space. It really is. I mean, there's certain
themes that continuously pop up in this podcast. Communications is one, but workforce might be a very, very close second to, and exactly to your point. Like we have to be, we're gonna have to rethink how we onboard and recruit, because there's not enough, there's just not enough pipeline, right, for folks joining the workforce. And I do think it's technologies like Fontus Blue and 120 and others that are going to actually help recruit and help people stay in the market. So we couldn't agree more on that point, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to just add one thing to that, to the workforce, but certainly while we have a software tool, I mean, even I know, again, with you all, that there's still that sort of consultative supporting them in helping, upskill and create processes for that workforce, even as they come over. So it's not just obviously use of the tool, but also helping those teams cross-train and, again, that skill transfer is a key component of all this, that even just the tools alone don't deliver.
Yeah.
That's a great
point. You're not just modernizing the technology, you're modernizing the processes that support the people.
That's right.
And it's,
They have to go hand in hand.
Great point. It's great.
So, well, congratulations then on your kind of acquisition with USALCO. Did you walk us through? I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this, or if there are any, Isaac, that are listening to this, might want to know how did that all come about? Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Quick version is that we had started in 2017. We had a bootstrap mentality. We had a few good individual investors that were also excellent board members. Have to give them a shout out: Dan Hampu, Gary Spring, and Peter Fisk. They were not only investors, but also very active in mentoring, supporting the growth. But so we were bootstrapped, had not taken significant funding. We knew we were reaching that phase that we were going to need to go and, raise some capital, look to grow the team. And then USALCO had reached out in 2023. They were actually building a competitive technology, and we're very transparent about that. They wanted to, their core business is providing an excellent coagulant portfolio, and they were like, hey, we're going to build out a digital tool to help support that coagulant portfolio, but we hear great things about Fontus. So we started that conversation in 2023. They were very clear about, hey, we would just love to join forces, because they were in the early stages. They've been making and selling coagulants. 1/3 of the country drinks water treated with USALCO's coagulants. So it's a huge impact. And I actually slow played it a little bit, Isaac and Megan, because I don't think we were ready to join them in 2023. So basically, there were some things I knew we needed to get in place, made sure that those were in place in 2024. And then we actively reached out. And then so we went completely to, hey, let's just join forces. So I skipped those seed round stages, etc. And I was just very, very fortunate to find such a good alignment, because they were in the early stages of, hey, knowing they wanted to build out a digital portfolio tools to support what their core business was. And so timing, luck.
And what a great way to capitalize your business, because it's fueling Fontus Blue to keep doing what Fontus Blue does.
There's, I think a lot of times I've heard stories where companies are acquired or merged, like even like software with software, and it's like, there were different missions and visions. A lot of times there's a certain amount of overlap, but this really allowed me, they have the same mission, vision, want to be an agent for good, on the water space. And so, we're very, very fortunate to have that kind of alignment. And again, I know I haven't had a boss for a long time, right? So, being a professor, being the CEO, but now, so I can say the leadership team at USALCO is also just top-notch, world-class, and, have this common mission, vision, and they're really looking forward to seeing that continue.
Yeah, a question that I get often from a lot of early stage founders is this notion of our go-to-market play is going to be partnerships, or we're going to weight partnerships really heavy, and we're going to go straight to the big corporations. And I know 120 tried to do that and we failed. And luckily it didn't kill the business. But I mean, we invested a lot of resources trying to make a Goliath partnership work that did not. I'm just curious, Chris, what advice, you have a successful outcome, but what advice would you give to fellow entrepreneurs or CEOs that are looking at these larger corporations for either partnership or partnership to acquire? Are there any things that you did successfully well that you would say, consider this?
So we first met Megan through Imagine H2O, right? And so I'll never forget Patrick Keelty from Century gave a talk about basically, do you go for, that core first group of customers and get those real champions for your product that can say great things about it? Or do you go for scale? And he was very clear that you need happy customers you can leverage. Now, that was my intuition, but hearing somebody in the industry emphasize that we definitely were like, hey, let's make sure that, for all the reasons that obviously you want to make sure your product's good, but it's again, very much a reputation referral business, right? The water.
That's right.
And so, we can now confidently say we've got the longest track record, those kinds of key things. So I would say, it seems again, very simple, but, get really, really happy customers and then work backwards. You can create, your marketing materials around that. Who your ideal customer profile is, because that even though it's a small group, that there's just so many reasons to do that and worry about scale later, which gets to reason why I was saying we weren't ready to handle scale in 2023 when USALCO was coming. In 2024, we weren't ready both from a product and from how we deliver the service and all those other kinds of reasons.
That's such an important thing to understand is like knowing do you have the right infrastructure set up to support the scale? Scale sounds super, super exciting to everyone until you experience it. And then you're like, oh, I didn't prepare for the scale.
Yeah. And my assumption is that, USALCO is expecting you to scale. I mean, to your point, 14 to 24-ish. I mean, they want you to be in all 50 states and expecting the technology and the people and the processes and expecting the business to scale with their growth plans. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so I would be really happy to have that merger in 23 and avoided that another year of being a founder with that stress. Yeah, I knew that, would have been 2x the stress post the acquisition if you couldn't actually be like, how do you interact with the teams and, make things happen? So there's obviously, they have a probably 20, 30x size footprint of the number, the number of customers, et cetera. Actually, need to do my math better. It's much larger than that. And so if you're going to sell into that, you're going to have to be ready to roll.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm curious as now as you're on the USALCO side, like what do you see as what's next for Fontus Blue and where is USALCO looking at the water market?
Yeah, so I think kind of the incremental piece, but very important piece is that USALCO, one of their intellectual property niches is that they have a lot of different proprietary blends of their aluminum-based coagulants. And so our virtual jar chemical dosing tool to accommodate that vast, so it's not just like 2 coagulants that our virtual jar tool has to support now, it may have to support hundreds. So we, in order to not only match the right tool with the utility, now we can match the right coagulant, those properties, again, that chemistry. So while that may seem incremental, it is really game changing and differentiating to be able to now help kind of match those up. And then obviously, as we said, this regulatory and even future regulatory, whether it's currently obviously PFAS, microplastics. I mean, like I said, it's their challenges and where the coagulant or the core treatment processes fit in, the water operations team's portfolio, if you will. That's, we want to make sure that the tools are being prepped to be ready for when those things become, very core to what's going to be their, day to day. So, like you said, we all know those things are coming. And again, new decade, new regulations, right? So
new rules need new tools.
Yeah.
it's good for business, but not good for our core customers. Yeah. This adds to that stress.
Well, that's why they need partners. I mean, like you, like 120, they have that in it together mentality, right? That's what we said. We feel like sometimes we're 50% therapists and 50% solution delivers, because sometimes you just need to say this, this isn't fair. Why do I have to do this? I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
Right. Just because you do.
Then again, because it increases the cost of doing business for them, right? And then we know, obviously their core customers don't want to pay more for the water. We all don't want to pay more for our water, but it's just necessary.
This is a question we didn't even put this on the notes before, but you were talking about Imagine H2O, and it kind of just brought to mind to me one of the things that I've always loved is the community of in water and the collaboration among that community. And we've been able to co-sponsor events together with Fontus Blue or others, even when there's a willingness to partner, even if it's just saying, hey, let's show up for the industry and we don't even have a technical partnership yet, or we're not integrated, or those kind of things. And so I would love your perspective too on how you feel about the water community as to the extent that it supports innovation on entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's just excellent observation, Isaac. So we're fortunate that our core customers, right, Fontus, USALCO's customers, and 120s, they don't have to compete. Like the city of Akron doesn't have to compete with the city of Indianapolis. So I think what makes that useful is that they tend to be collaborative, I think, in the sense that they want to share best practices amongst utilities because, right, they're just serving people of Indianapolis the best they can, or the city of Akron. So I think I want to try and give them kind of credit for, that the more that they've embraced that, you have great people on water that want to obviously come up with solutions for them. So I think that we're just fortunate, like we're not all competing for this. I mean, we want to come up with solutions with the same core customer base, but because they're not selling in Indianapolis is not the same as selling somewhere else. Just that collaborative spirit just runs through. And lastly, the people in water that want to serve water, I think, seem to have that common theme of knowing that, it's important, and that gets expressed different ways, but usually for some reason it attracts that kind of collaborative, core kind of group of people as well. So we all want to see good innovation win and more of it, right? Yeah. So I guess ending on the note of innovation entrepreneurship, what's a single piece of advice that you would give to an early stage entrepreneur out there with a great idea, good technology, trying to make it happen? So I've enjoyed your podcast so far. So I want to shout out to like one of the ones from before about whether it was even yours, Megan, about making sure you talk to your customers, and the original one with you and Isaac. But so I'm not going to use that one, but I do think that is it. You really must talk to your customers. And actually, it was you said, right? You took every customer call you could in the early days, right? I mean, that. So I guess, reemphasize that one. But I do think the one that I've reflected on the most was the impact that I would say build your true mentor people network piece. I think that number one, most of them won't be afraid to tell you if you're a little off base or create, certain things. But I had very fortunate to have people tell me, "Hey, Chris, is this a business? This a hobby?" Just really press on making sure, that if I would have just kind of been in my own little environment with the team and, trying to create a widget to sell, but, really building out that mentor network. Obviously, Imagine H2O, as we brought up, helped expand that, or there's different ways you can expand that, but certainly get good resources, people that you can talk to, because being a founder is a lonely pursuit. And so I think that's also one way to not only help build the business, but help navigate those challenges as well.
That's great. Well, Chris, it is always a pleasure to speak with you, and just thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
My pleasure, and all the best to you and the 120 team in 2026 as well.
Yeah.
Same to you.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining this conversation with Chris Miller from USALCO, Fontus Blue. We love getting to have these conversations. And so please, if you enjoyed this conversation, like it, share it, listen to it, reach out to us, let us know who else you would like to hear from who makes water work. Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.